Haki transcends all things, but Haki is also, unfortunately, the worst power system in the entire series of One Piece. Compared to fruit powers, compared to technology, genetic traits, other unique skills, raw power in itself, Haki seems to be the worst of the bunch. And it's unfortunate too, because even though Oda could, let's say, make certain changes and add new elements to Haki, the foundation of Haki itself, that is where Oda is lacking, and it comes down to consistency and portrayal. Specifically, I mean Oda's artistic depiction of Haki. That it's no good. When you look at how, let's say, powers are used, different powers, they're really well organized, and they have awakenings to them, also counter matchups, and also synergies with certain fruits. Differents are a very well organized system that Oda put a lot of thought into, for sure. And it's not to say that Haki never existed. You can argue in chapter 1 it was there. Shanks scared off the Lord of the Coast, but the way Oda has gone about it in the story ever since the second half of the pre-time skip has been pretty off, very off in many respects. The worst offender is observation Haki, because observation Haki you would think would be utilized way more frequently, but A, lot of times you don't know when they're using it unless they tell you they're using it. B is that more often than not, the depiction of it in the manga is pretty poor. Back in the day in the anime, they used to have an eye effect, where you would see the eye colors change from wherever they were to a red color, and then with that red color, that'd be a sign that they're seeing the future, or they would sense something that's awry. The anime used to do that. Even in other movies and specials, you would see that too, but that has stopped being the case in the anime, and you rarely see that, if ever, whenever someone is using observation Haki. Because of the importance of Haki, where Haki seems to be, again, the most important of the power systems that we see in the story of One Piece, Conqueror's Haki being the apex of that is, I think, just as questionable now as observation Haki. And it's armored Haki that is pretty easy to understand compared to Conqueror's Haki and observation Haki. And the issue with Conqueror's Haki nowadays doesn't come with the infusion bit, because the infusion part is pretty simplistic, where you can infuse your attacks to Conqueror's Haki, making them more powerful. The depiction of it is kind of off, because you would see armored Haki with black sparks, and they have Conqueror's Haki, let's say, bigger, thicker black sparks. And it's like, hold on, is someone using infusion or not? A lot of times folks who read the manga get confused. And then there are other cases too, for example, where we can assume that they're maybe using infusion, but we don't see it. Like, for example, in the vast majority of the last arc, Agate Island, we don't see Luffy really use infusion that much. Whether against the Seraphims or the Five Elders, against Kizaru with one kick, we do see it, but then regularly we don't really see it. Or let's say in the arc before that, in Wild Country, Big Mom, she has Conqueror's Haki infusion. She annihilated Page 1 with that, and probably had a defensive dome of infusion on her body when Kid was doing his attack on her. But for most of the arc when she's fighting, we don't really see infusion, even though maybe you could assume that it's there. So it kind of gets weird when it comes to Oda's depiction, because it's very inconsistent. But what's even more consistent is the ability to knock out people. Think about how far someone like Luffy has come now in the story, and what was said back in Fishman Island. On Fishman Island, Luffy knocked out 50,000 of these boys, and fishmen from Jump are physically stronger than humans, and on top of that, these are hardened pirates. But Luffy could knock out half of Horty Jones's army, and on top of that, according to Oda and SBS's, he said that Rayleigh and Shanks, if they were there, they would knock out every fishman there. All 100,000 fishmen, including probably Horty Jones and its officers. That's how OD that ability is. On paper, key words there, okay? I'm saying it again. Conqueror's Haki makes the number game moot, particularly at a certain level of Conqueror's Haki application. If Luffy had a deal with, let's say, 500,000 fishmen at this point in time, on paper, he's knocking out all of them, or at least half of them, because Luffy has come so much further now in the story than when he was on Fishman Island. His Haki across the board is better. He has learned infusion, and also he has the Gear 5 form, which only elevates his power to a whole new level. And yet, over the last 2 to 3 arcs, Oda has emphasized the importance of numbers, where Kaido and his army, the numbers game matters. When it comes to Egghead Island and the invasion of the Marines, the numbers game does matter. And then even on a reverse sense, in Elbaf with Emu, the numbers game kind of somewhat matters too, because when Emu first touches down in chapter 1179, comes in with the major blast of Conqueror's Haki, and all he really knocks out in the Western Village are the kids. That's it. The giant kids in that chapter get knocked out, but the giant adults are fine. And I remember seeing people kind of complain back then, hold on, this is Emu's Conqueror's Haki, right? How come someone like Chopper is still conscious? Or Nami, members of the weak trio of the Stride crew. How is it that they're still conscious at this point in time when they're in the face of Emu's Conqueror's Haki? The very same Conqueror's Haki that Luffy, a few chapters later, would acknowledge was a very oppressive and stifling Conqueror's Haki. That's why he was consuming so much food to power up, because he could feel, based on the Haki alone, just how intimidating and how powerful Emu was. But yet Nami's not knocked out by his Conqueror's Haki, same for Chopper. Usopp was already out, but they're members of the weak trio, and yet they can still stand tall. That's kind of confusing. When you had the Marines pull on in, Buster Call style, a mega Buster Call, there should have been swaths of Marines on the island, like in the thousands, that got knocked out by Luffy's Conqueror's Haki. Obviously with Kizaru, he has shown no signs of Conqueror's Haki utilization. However, the elders have Conqueror's Haki, and even still, you're not seeing people like the weak trio get knocked out. When they defend Robin in the Labo Stratum area, why isn't Jay Garcia Saturn just Conqueror's Haki wave, Chopper, Usopp, Nami get knocked out, and then Brook and Robin have to try and finagle something to escape and then save Nami, save Chopper, and save Usopp? But no, it's not there. Shockingly enough, it's way more contained as an ability than it was back in the day. It feels like back in the early post-time skip and in the pre-time skip, Conqueror's Haki was way more broad-reaching in terms of its ability to knock out people, knock out armies, and you just keep things pushing. Whether it was the Kuja Pirates by the hundreds that were in the stadium that are getting knocked out by Luffy's second use of the ability back in the day. Whether it was like probably 1,000 Marines during Marineford War that also got knocked out by Luffy. Whether it was on Fishman Island where you had 50,000 fishmen, like the scale kept on getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, and then Oda kind of stopped. Oda just kind of said, nah, you know what? From now on, the numbers matter. I just can't have the characters knock out 500k people in a single go, even though they probably could on paper. We can't have that for a fun and enticing One Piece story. But then at the same time, on the reverse side here in Wild Country, you have Kaido and Big Mom. They ain't pulse waving Conqueror's Haki and just knocking out like 1,000 or 2,000 or 3,000 samurai? Huh? Because they're strong or they have good willpower? Folks that are substantially weaker than even the weak trio can withstand Conqueror Haki waves from guys that are stronger than Luffy to this day? Like, do you see what I'm saying here? It's very weird how Oda goes about utilizing the knockout feature of Conqueror's Haki. It really is pick and choose what's cool rather than, let's say, what actually makes sense and be consistent. The wow factor is the key thing here, not the consistency. And that's why when you have Joy Boy's Ultimate Haki be undone on Egghead Island, the wow factor was, okay, it's the Ultimate Haki, and not only is it so powerful to where the entire Mega Buster Call is getting knocked out, at least what remains of it, but also the elders are forced back. They are punted back to the Holy Land and they're forced to de-transform. And so now we can see in the future of the story, that's gonna be part of Luffy's end game. To be able to knock out a Mega Buster Call and even negate the powers that are being used in the field around him. At the same time, what we're seeing with Joy Boy's Ultimate Haki, in a way, kind of feels like it's a revert back to the norm of how Haki used to be. Not in terms, let's say, the negating factor, but in terms of the scope of what could be affected. Big Mom and Kaido themselves should be able to utilize Conqueror Haki waves that can encompass entire islands, easily, entire countries, Multi-islands, easily, without question. Remember when Doffy and Luffy had their foot clash in chapter 782, when their feetsies were fighting each other? They were pulsating Conqueror's Haki waves throughout like the entire area around them. And this is a man that's like significantly weaker than Kyle and Big Mom. Significantly. But somehow these two aren't putting out a scale like that. And then when that scale does happen, i.e. Imu and Gunmu, they're not knocking out anybody, except for kids. To me, it is a very strange thing, but I get it in terms of the fun factor of the story, right? You want to have numbers matter. You want to build up massive armies to intimidate and so on and so forth. You just can't have a dude like Luffy knocking out millions in a single go. Even though by the time he's gonna, let's say, be in the final war, that's what should happen. It could be an army of 3 million. It don't matter. Pulse wave, get out of here, dude. Like, hello? Huh? The determining factors of that are so variable, it's insane. What determines your ability to withstand high intensity Conqueror's Haki or not? We don't know. We don't know. Outside of the ultimate Haki, which can even knock out vice admirals, we don't really know what that ceiling or what that metric is. It's part of the vagueness of Oda, where he loves to hide in that vagueness, for sure. But it's also a sad thing about it too, because Infusion is taken over as the most prominent part of Conqueror's Haki, even though I would argue that it should be the knockout feature. Because if you just can't stand the presence of somebody, like their will is so high that it affects you. Like, for example, why not have that happen in real time during fights, where like someone's Conqueror's Haki is so intense that fighting against them in a one-on-one fight, it's hard to stay conscious, just being near them. To me, it's a strange thing. The scale has gotten smaller as time goes on, and how the numbers have mattered a lot to Oda. It's only as of late where like the scale got big again, like pretty damn big, like really, really big actually. But it's like, hold on, how come Chopper and Nami, they're so conscious, and then the kids only get knocked out, but not any other warriors, but not the librarian or the baker or the butcher or the teacher or even the sanitation worker? That's a hard-ass job, and he's not knocked out. Though to be fair, at chapter 1150, we do see some of the parents get knocked out by Gunmu's Haki along with the kids, so I stand corrected. Some bakers and some butchers did get knocked out. Let me know your stance on the subject matter at hand. Of course, if you're a YouTube member, you get this video first, and if you're a noble, for a short window of time right now, you can recommend a video topic on my community post. And for everybody else, make sure to, of course, subscribe to the channel, click on that bell to join the notification squad. I'm gonna catch you guys and gals on the flip side.
See you. Bye bye.